we were on a bunch of comps, like a lot of comps. And so, I mean, there are just these cool little labels, Init Records or Springman Records or Negative Progression or Red Leader or Rebound or again, Drive Through, Law of Inertia, all these great little labels that were all willing to help us out and to make things happen.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we begin, check out In the Clouds. It's In the Clouds NJ on Instagram. They make handmade custom records. No minimum to order. Yes, that means you can make one. You can order direct on their website, intheclouds.io. I just thought it was a really cool company. They didn't pay me to do this, and I thought that was awesome. So if someone's looking to make some vinyl, then I think this is a great way to do it. Coed was a punk band from Verne, California, or Verne, I don't know how to say this. They put out 2 releases on Cool Guy Records, which were Sometimes, Always, Maybe Never, and a split with the band Pollen. That's pretty much all there is online about this band. I mean, they have their songs on Spotify, and you can find them also on YouTube, like the songs on YouTube. But they're kind of one of those obscure bands that you probably didn't hear or you saw them on a compilation back then. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that band. I think they fall into some of the bands that I've interviewed, like Jejune or Zoinks or Grieving Eucalyptus or My Pal Trigger. It's one of those names where you're like, holy shit, yeah, I do remember that band. And some of you might have absolutely no fucking idea who this band was. Just another reason why I want to get them on the podcast, because if there's nothing out there that to me is very interesting, because then that means I can kind of archive this and add their story to the internet. The funny thing was that Waleed had emailed me just saying, hey, I found your podcast. I think it's really cool. And I looked at his name. I was like, this sounds really familiar. And the funny thing was that I actually knew his brother when I lived out in San Diego. And then I remembered Waleed's name because he used to be a writer for Alt Press. So I replied and I was like, are you this guy? He's like, yeah. I was like, holy shit, I got to get you on. And so he said yes. And I got him on the Skype. And this is what we chat about. Their AOL email account still being active. Seeing someone who has a shirt of a band you like. Opening for Less Than Jake. Playing at Steve Aoki's apartment, how he writes songs, working for Mean Street Magazine, hanging with At the Drive-In, playing a show with 15, the band Pollen, writing for Alt Press Magazine, the Bullweevil story, and a ton more. A couple more things. You want to support the podcast, you can go on patreon.com/thiswasascene. I have a tier for $1 a month. So it's, again, as I always say, $1 a month is equivalent to 2.5 cups of Starbucks coffee that you would pay for or not pay for this year, just so you can support the podcast, especially if you've been listening for a while and you want to help out, then that's awesome. Also, if you have a marketing department that said, hey, we need an explainer video to explain what our company does in 60 to 90 seconds, then check out my company, drive80.com, drive80.com. I've been freelance animating for the last 13 or so years, and what you get with working with me is some kick-ass service, super faster response, clear communication, and a fucking awesome video that you could showcase to market what your company does so people understand what you do very, very quickly. I've actually got a few gigs by mentioning what I do on this podcast. One's really cool. It's for this company called StoryCorps. Back in the day, there was this band called Heft, and this guy Martin played in it, which I've been trying to get him on the podcast, so hopefully one day he will to tell the Heft story. But he had reached out to me. He's like, yeah, I heard that you do explainer videos, and I ended up doing 3 for StoryCorps, and it's for this initiative called One Small Step. So that'll be launching soon. I'll probably market that on my Instagram account as well. But so yeah, you never know. If you need animation, hit me up at mike@drive80.com. That's all I got to say. So feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. When I got your email, I hit up Beth. So Beth was still one of my best friends. She was living in San Diego at the time, in downtown, and she had met Ali, and they became friends. And then I met him just by going to Scolari's all the time.
Sure.
She's like, oh, his brother writes for AP Magazine. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah. She's like, yeah. And I think I remember at the time she said that you played in Coed. And I was like, that name sounds familiar. I'm like, I feel like because we were on tour a couple times, and I felt that we had passed through certain, like, your name had come up because we just from being on the road, or you guys had come to Jersey, and or like I think you said we were potentially going to like maybe do something together.
Yeah, I believe we had reached out to some Jersey contacts, and that kind of led us to someone in your band perhaps who might have helped us out as well. We did end up playing one show in New Jersey, and I was actually able to figure that out, which show it was and who was on the bill and all that. It turns out Lanemeyer was not on the bill though, so I don't think we ever got a chance to play together on the same show.
Maybe that's how I think that might be how we heard of you because you most likely contacted Sean. He was our drummer.
Yeah, that name sounds familiar. Now, I also saw another old email that was sent to us by Richard and Stephanie from Drive Through Records, and they had made a quick little mention in the email. Oh, by the way, the guys in Lanemeyer like your band, and so I was like, oh, cool. So again, that was 1998, 99, somewhere in that range.
How did you find that email? Did you still use the same email account?
Believe it or not, yes, that email account, which is coedmail, MAIL, at AOL, is still an active email account, believe it or not. So,
So freaking cool.
yeah, but we had a bunch of old emails that we had printed out for, whatever reason, like trying to get the tour together and just making sure we had all of our contacts in a folder. So I had a bunch of printouts of old emails as well that I found in a box that Mac, the guitarist of Coed, had given me. That was one of the emails from Richard and Stephanie from Drive Through, and they had mentioned in that email, oh, by the way, the guys in Lanemeyer like your band. So it was kind of cool seeing that too.
You had said you'd heard a couple episodes, that's why you'd email me.
Yes.
So you get the premise, it's like going back in time, it's kind of like the origins of the band and how they broke up or whoever I'm talking to. I'll try to have a bunch of tabs up on my computer to just reference certain things and like I'll have usually Discogs up and Wikipedia, which I don't see of you guys.
No, I don't think there is one of us.
Yeah,
No.
so this will become kind of that, I guess. It was like in some way, but I found sometimes always maybe never is on YouTube the song, and you guys are on Spotify as well. But I was listening to that song and I was like, dude, this song's great. It has a very Fat Records vibe to it, but like when she starts singing, it's so different from that. And I was like, dude, this song is still fucking catchy.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we put out that album, Sometimes Always Maybe Never, in May of 1998. We had recorded that back in, I think, January of 1998. We had been listening to a wide variety of things, and so the band was kind of a culmination of all these different influences kind of all coming together. Really, we kind of towed the line between that double time California skate pop punk sound, like those kind of more Fat Wreck Chords bands like Lagwagon or No Use for a Name and whatnot. But we also had kind of more of a straightforward power pop punk sound, like All or Smoking Popes or Big Drill Car. We also kind of maybe slightly later on had bands that were listening to that maybe were more of the emo adjacent kind of bands. Game Face Farside, Hank Shaw, Get Up Kids, Jimmy Eat World, Alkaline Trio. So we're kind of this amalgamation of what I think are two or three different subgenres of kind of the pop punk variety there.
What were the names of everyone in the band? Because I don't see them online. Wait, do they? No, I'm sorry, they are here. It's Jeff, Kathy, Mac, and you.
Yeah, that's the first lineup of the band. That lineup was on the first album, which is Sometimes Always Maybe Never, and also on our first 7-inch, or only 7-inch, which was called Soft Constant. That lineup existed until about late 98, early 99. And then Jeff left the band, and we had a new bass player that we brought in. His name was Sean, and Sean ended up playing with us pretty much throughout the rest of the band time. The band broke up in the US January of 2001. And I say that because we ended up doing a Japan tour maybe about 4 or 5 months later.
I've heard a lot of bands that had a shorter run and then they'll go out to Japan and the shows are great. Was it the same experience for you guys?
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, it was. I mean, the fact of the matter was that the shows in Japan were just awesome all the way across the board. We had a wonderful time with our friends out there. We had befriended some Japanese bands, and that's how we were invited to go and tour over there. They set us up with some really, really great shows, and it was pretty amazing to be across the world like that, have people singing your songs and be into your band, a band that you just thought, well, maybe, a couple hundred people have heard here in the US. And no, that wasn't necessarily the case. So, and again, this is all pre-internet. I mean, not pre-internet. You have AOL and you have, some very kind of light internet stuff going on, but definitely pre-social media. So you didn't have a great grasp of your popularity back then. You didn't know exactly who was listening to you and really where they came from, unless you got emails or letters. Yes, we got actual letters and postcards and stuff like that too. That's kind of how we knew that, oh, yeah, there are people in other states or maybe even other countries that are interested in our band.
That's so fucking cool. Where was it? Northern California? Did you guys grow up in?
No, we all grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles County and parts of Riverside County as well, San Bernardino County. So we're all Southern Californians. But the band was kind of quote unquote based in Laverne, California, which is on the eastern edge of LA County, about 30 miles east of Los Angeles. So we were kind of, suburban kids growing up in Southern California. We all met, at least the three of us, Mac, Kathy, and I, all kind of met through going to Cal Poly Pomona, which was the university we went to as undergrads. That's kind of how the band really started to form.
So how did you personally get started in the punk scene?
I got interested in punk rock probably in the mid 1980s. I was initially into metal. I mean, I was into metal when I was like a kindergartner or first grader. I was into Iron Maiden and Crew and Priest and Ozzy and Dokken and bands like that. Around 1985 or so, my brother, I have an older brother, 5 years older than I am, and he rented Rock and Roll High School, which featured the Ramones, of course, very prominently featured in that movie. And that's my first kind of taste of what punk rock sounded like. And I really took a liking to that sound and that style.
A lot of people say that, and I think I may have asked this before, but like I never thought about it because you go from metal to punk rock. There's such a less aggressiveness in sound, I guess. It's a lot fuller in metal. There's a lot going on, and then punk, it's a little bit more simplified, but it's aggressive in its own way. Like, what made you like that?
Yeah, I like the accessibility. The fact of the matter was the songs were a lot more simpler. They were a little easier to get into. The bands themselves didn't seem to have this disconnect from the audience like the major metal bands or hard rock bands of the time did. They played these huge arenas and whatnot, and just seemed so different from something I could be doing. And I was just getting into becoming a drummer at that point and, just kind of tooling around on an acoustic guitar we had laying around the house. I was not a guitarist at all, but I just thought, wow, these are 3 chord songs. These are very simple and very accessible. I just thought the song structure in and of itself was very appealing. So that I think was part of it. As I kind of dug further into it, my brother would bring home more records. I just kind of liked this sound that wasn't so polished or produced like the metal or the hard rock that was really popular at the time. So for me, it seemed just so like, wow, I could probably pull this off. And so I think that was kind of exciting for me, which was this opportunity to try to play something of that nature and try to make a go at it. I gave it a shot later on. It took me a while to kind of circle back to punk rock. I had played with some friends, of course, through middle school and high school and all that. And we played hard rock and then we played kind of more grungy styles. And then, of course, the pendulum swung kind of back to punk rock. That got me interested in starting a band and moving forward on that end. But I've been performing, in projects and garage bands and stuff like that for years prior to co-ed. It wasn't until I had met Mac at Cal Poly that I thought, okay, this is going to be the pop punk band that maybe I had been searching for quite a while.
So just want to reference to that before when I was talking about the song I heard. It was My Escape. It was the first song on that
Oh, the
album.
first song on Sometimes Always. Yeah.
Because when I was looking at it, I was reading it as Sometimes Always, Maybe Never as the song, and then it's like full album, and I was like, oh wait a minute, there's 15 on there, and I only listened to the first one, so that's why I was just kind of clarify from before because it didn't make any sense that I was saying that the entire album was the song I liked.
Oh, okay.
So you meet these guys, and this is in college, you said.
Yes, yeah.
So when you're going into college, usually by that point, you're thinking, all right, my career path is going to be I'm going to college, and then I get a job, and that's it. And it's funny to me when I'm talking to some bands that they've started in college and then they started touring afterwards. I feel like in your mid 20s, you feel like you're ancient when you're doing that. What was your thoughts on that?
No, not that, that was not my goal at all. My whole thing was, yeah, I wanted to play. I was very much about joining another band and doing this and keeping this going. College for me, of course, yeah, I was interested in getting a career, which I ended up doing. And I was a journalism major and really enjoyed being a journalism major. At the same time, I also really enjoyed being a musician too. Getting a chance to meet Mac at Cal Poly was really exciting. We met actually on the first week of class. I had actually was walking out of I think the student union or something like that, and I had a T-shirt from one of the Doctor Strange Records bands. The band was called Mandingo. I was wearing their T-shirt, and Mac just couldn't believe he saw somebody else with a T-shirt of a band that he liked as well called Mandingo. So we actually, started talking, and we found out, oh, we're into all the Doctor Strange Records bands. So we were kind of from that whole Doctor Strange Records circle, in that we went to a lot of those band shows and bought those records and just really were into that scene. So it was Rhythm Collision and Game Face and Brown Lobster Tank and Mandingo, Zoinks, Boll Weevils. All these artists were really within our wheelhouse at the time, and still are, of course, too.
I know you had said you listened to a few episodes. Did you listen to those episodes?
I did, yes. In fact, that's kind of what turned me on to your podcast in the first place. Is I was thinking, wow, he's consistently interviewing all these Doctor Strange bands of my youth here, and this is fantastic to hear all this stuff and get their stories as well. So yeah, that was kind of our initial connection. So this whole circle around the Doctor Strange label at the time and all the releases that were coming out were really influencing us big time. Mac had told me that, hey, he knew Kathy, of course, and they were dating at the time. They were both playing soccer. They were both kinesiology majors at Cal Poly. He said, look, she's got a great singing voice. Let's see if we can put a project together. It was a few more months later, we finally decided to connect again. I think we had happened to see each other on campus again. And that's when he said, look, I think we should really try to put something together. And actually, he came to my house and he plugged in his guitar, and the first song we played together was a Zoink song. So that was really neat. So it was a great opportunity for us to kind of start off on this whole Doctor Strange trip here by playing a Zoink song. I was amazed that there was anybody out there who could play a Zoink song on their guitar. It was just really exciting for us to kind of connect on this level of favorite bands and kind of being in that same headspace.
You were playing drums for the band.
I was playing drums, yeah. I always played drums for co-ed. I did play bass on one of our releases, and I also did play a little bit of guitar on the recordings kind of here and there as well. But I was always live. I was always the drummer.
It's funny, just when you said that you were wearing the Mandingo shirt, I think the cool thing is that nowadays you can still run into somebody and have that same vibe. Like literally this morning, I was getting a bagel, and the person behind the counter had a Balance and Composer shirt, and I walk up and I was just like, "That's a great album." She's like, "Oh my God, I totally love this band." And we literally started having it's like that automatic bond, and it's cool that that still exists. Like that never goes away. You're like, "How do you know that band?"
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, I see people who have, that obscure band or just a band that's just not as well known in a sense here. And you see that T-shirt. Next thing you know, you can strike that conversation, and it's just really cool. That T-shirt, by the way, was given to me but for free from the band, and so we actually credited them in the album. In our first album, we did give them an extra special thanks. Fast forward a good quarter century, and Mac and I actually went and saw Mandingo play as part of a Doctor Strange Records night that happened about 4 or 5 months ago here in Southern California, and it was kind of neat seeing those guys again after all those years. So it's pretty cool how things have come full circle sometimes.
Did you ever get to play a show with them?
It's weird. I don't think we ever did play with Mandingo. We did play with a band that they had formed after they had broken up. It was called Stereo Typewriter. And so we played with them, and I think we even did a small tour with them too, just kind of up and down California and maybe into Reno, Nevada. And we did get a chance to play with Zach from Zoinks. He started a band called Big in Japan later on. We also got a chance to play with his band too. So we never got to play with Mandingo or Zoinks, but we got to play with the bands that members of those bands formed later on. So
Oh, that's
there was
awesome.
that connection at least.
So when you guys get together and have your first practice, Kathy did come and sing, or it was just the two of you?
I think it may have been just Mac and I initially, and then she had came in maybe a couple of weeks later. I think Mac just wanted to jam with me and see how things would go, and then Kathy showed up later on. Yeah, she came in, and as soon as she got to the microphone, I was like, "Wow, this is fantastic. She has a great singing voice, and this is going to be really cool. It's going to be unique, and I think it was going to offset us from a lot of the bands that were out there already." I think it did. I think it gave us that edge that maybe made us kind of a unique band on the roster and a unique band on the bill. If people went and saw that show, that was really great. I thought that instantly we were all kind of getting together on the same page, and we immediately started writing songs and putting things together. I had some songs already in the can. I was and currently am still a pretty prolific songwriter, so I had quite a few songs ready to go, and Mac had songs ready to go. So we had put a demo together. We probably put that demo together in, I think, March of 1997. So a couple months after meeting and after playing together in the garage for the first time, we had gone to a recording studio, put a demo together there. That studio, I was really excited to go to it because a band called Donuts and Glory, and I think you may have interviewed them as well, had done a 7-inch at that same studio. And so I was like, oh, cool. We get to go to the studio where Donuts and Glory had recorded their 7-inch. And that was good. I mean, it was a good demo. And of course, getting that demo out was important because we wanted labels to hear us and hopefully get a deal of some kind there too, which ultimately ended up happening. So we still had not been a full band. That was just Mac, Kathy, and I. So I played bass on that demo and drums on that demo. And then we did a second demo, I believe in the summer of 97, around August or so. That demo also was just the three of us. So we weren't really a live band until the end of 1997. I believe December of 97 was our first gig. Let me see. I think I wrote it down here. It looks like December 1st, 1997 was our very first gig as a full live band, a four-piece. By that point in time, we would have Jeff on the bass, and so we could be a four-piece and play live. That was great. And actually, the head of the label that we would eventually sign to, he saw us at our very first show there. And then we played a second show in January of 98. And I think maybe, if not a day later, maybe just a couple days later, we were in the studio recording our full-length album, Sometimes, Always, Maybe Never. That was it. It was just kind of moving right along at that point in time.
Where were you guys like playing in like locally?
Locally, we were playing Coos Cafe, which was in Santa Ana. We played the Showcase Theater, which was in Corona. We did play out in LA as well. Our very last show actually was at the Troubadour in West Hollywood. We played the Roxy with Less Than Jake actually in 1998. We opened up for them. We actually won a contest, and that's how we were able to open up for Less Than Jake. They actually had a flyer that said, Less Than Jake invite you to be the opening act at their only LA appearance. And that was September 21st, 1998, at the Roxy. All we had to do was send in a tape of our band, and that's exactly what we did. And we got a phone call from the guys in Less Than Jake that said, hey, we'd love for you guys to come and open up for us. And that's exactly what ended up happening.
When that opportunity, though, when you guys were looking at that, did anybody in the band go, nah, this isn't worth it? Or is everyone like, oh, we have to do this?
Oh yeah, no, we jumped at it right away. We were like, no, well, let's make this happen. Let's get this out there and see what happens. And sure enough, we ended up being that band that won the contest and got to open. That was great too because it was a sold out show. So the second we stepped on the stage, the curtains open at the Roxy, and it's just a complete sea of faces, in the crowd there. And that was really exciting. And of course, Less Than Jake being Less Than Jake, I believe it was their Hello Rockview album that had just been released at that point. It was part of their record release show, actually. Their record would be coming out maybe a couple weeks later. It was a big Capitol Records release for them. So that was neat. So we played a lot of those types of shows. We played, quite a few places, just random gigs that would come up in stores, at record stores. We played at college campuses as well. We played at the Shea Cafe in San Diego, which was on the UC San Diego campus, at UCLA. Yeah, so we played at UC Santa Barbara, and not actually on the campus, but we played at Steve Aoki's apartment. And so he was throwing gigs in his apartment back in the day. And we played a gig there in early 1999, I believe it was, like January of 99. We played with a band called the Jazz June, who I think you may have also interviewed.
Yeah, yeah, I did. Wasn't Steve Aoki, wasn't he in a ska band or something like that, or just a punk band?
I think he was in a punk band. Yeah, I don't really know. I know I used to see him at a lot of punk shows, and he was always kind of just one of the guys that you'd always see at all the shows that you went to as well. So he was out there quite a bit, in the scene. Very supportive of local bands or touring bands coming through. He had an apartment there at UC Santa Barbara, and he would just have bands play literally in his living room, or my drums were actually kind of set up in his kitchen because people were in the living room, and I had to kind of push all the way back into the kitchen back there. So it was cool. It's just great to be a part of that time and a part of what was happening at that point. Was really quite incredible.
How did you guys get signed to Cool Guy Records?
I believe we sent in a demo. Mac had kind of known the head of Cool Guy Records. His name was Danny. And so Mac had just sent in our demo tape, and Danny, I think, took a liking to it. Said, yeah, I'd be interested in putting out your record. We, I think, had offers from maybe one or two other labels to do like an EP or a split or something like that. But I think we were holding out for the full length. When Danny offered us the full length, we said, yeah, okay, great, let's move forward with this. And he already had several releases on his roster by that point in time. So he was, kind of a small, established indie label running it out of his house, but, had some distribution and had a little bit of success through the releases that he had already done. So for us, it was like, okay, yeah, let's give this a shot and see what ends up happening. We went to For the Record, which was and still is a recording studio in Orange, California. We went there because a lot of our favorite bands had recorded there already. Farside and Game Face and Sensefield and bands of that nature. Again, we were really excited to be at that studio. We did the album with Paul Miner and E. E is the owner for the record, and he had done an all record. He had been like one of the several engineers, I think, on one of the all records. I think it was Percolator. And so I was a huge all fan and still am. For me, getting to record with somebody who had worked with all at some point in time was pretty exciting. Paul Miner at the time was a relatively new engineer. He had just started a new band called Death by Stereo, which became quite popular later on, of course, but he was just starting off his engineering career as well, and he's now done tons and tons of records. We also had Sergio Chavez, who helped assist on that record too, and he went on to do a lot of really big records like Evanescence and Motorhead, and he was a assistant engineer and engineer on some of those big records, and also worked with a Tsunami Bomb, which was also a band that got some comparisons to us back in the day there too. So that was where we recorded our first record, Sometimes, Always, Maybe Never. It was just exciting to get that record out and get touring, play a bunch of shows and meet people, and just kind of launch the band that way. It was really, really an exciting period of time. And for me as well, personally speaking, it was an opportunity to work with a producer who was known and had done really great records, and kind of learned from that process, and also had written several songs on that record. I would say maybe less than half or just about half of the songs on that record are credited to me, and then the other half are credited to Mac. And there's a couple songs on there that we kind of co-wrote. Generally speaking, it was either Mac's contributions or my contributions on that album. It was just neat for me to see the songs that I wrote in my bedroom finally come alive in a studio, and then, make it on the stage too.
Lyrically, you were doing half the songs? or musically?
Lyrics and music. Yeah, I was doing both. So I usually came with, and I still do the same thing, which is I come with a complete song. So I will usually demo everything out, drums, bass, guitar, and vocals, kind of have it all as a complete package and then hand it off to whoever wants to take it. I had written songs, and again, I had some songs in the can, but other songs I had written expressly for that album. And it was just really neat to see my songwriting starting to kind of gain traction in a sense. Of course, be part of that record and of course be part of the tour that ensued.
Were you just like writing like music first and then lyrics on top of that, or were you just writing? What was your whole thing process with writing? Was it just when you're writing a song, or were you a writer?
It's interesting. No, I never really journaled, and I'm not kind of a poet either or anything of that nature. I'm more of the kind of guy that a song idea just kind of comes to me. It just kind of drops into my head somehow. I might be doing something completely unrelated to music. At the time, I was going to school, I was working, and just kind of at work or at school, all of a sudden, boom, this idea hits me of like a chorus, and then I would write the song around the chorus. That was kind of what was happening, is that just kind of this thought would happen where I would hear a melody, I'd hear the chords behind it, I'd hear some of the lyrics in it, and I'd kind of go from there. And that's still kind of what happens. Sometimes it's just noodling around the guitar. I'm like, oh, these chords are kind of interesting. Let's put this together and see what we can write on top of that. But other times it just kind of hits me that, oh, yeah, this is a kind of a great idea of a chorus or a hook. I'm going to keep moving forward with this. And I remember calling my house from a payphone at school and singing into my answering machine so that way I wouldn't forget it, because he had no other way of recording it, or be at work and calling in and recording it into my answering machine. I get home, I'm like, oh, good thing, because I totally forgot what I had sung earlier, and come home and then I would write the rest of the song that way. But no, I wasn't really journaling a lot. I'm one of more of those kind of lyrics come last type of person, where the song really happens first, the melody and the chord changes and kind of the beat that I have in my head as a drummer, and then we'll put the lyrics in there somehow and make it all work.
What was like your topics that you wrote about?
Oh, stuff that kind of happened to me, or stuff that may not have happened to me, but I just kind of had concepts or ideas for. A lot of it was, being in your early 20s and trying to find love, or finding love and it doesn't work out, those types of songs. So I had a few of those happening as well. Just kind of a sign of the times of where I was in my life and what I was doing. And there were some songs I wrote that were just kind of like me just literally talking about me being busy as well and being too busy for this, that, or the other. I was a very busy kid in my early 20s. I was interning at a magazine, which I ended up being the editor of that magazine later on.
Wait, which magazine?
The magazine was called Mean Street Magazine, and it was a music magazine here in Southern California. And I was an intern there. From an intern, I became an assistant editor. From assistant editor, I ended up becoming the editor in chief pretty much the same month I graduated from college. So it all kind of worked out very nicely. And it was great because it was a music magazine. So I was already very much immersed in the music scene as a performer, and now I'm immersed in the music scene as a journalist too. So not only am I performing music, I'm also covering music, and that just makes my worlds blend even more at that point in time. And it was great. I was meeting so many people in the industry, managers, and going to recording studios and meeting the bands, of course, and interviewing people. And it was just a really, really exciting, very fruitful time in my life, of a lot of things kind of coming together all at the right point in time.
That's interesting that when I asked the question, what did you write about, or were you a journal or whatever? But you are a writer. You're a journalist.
Yes, I was a journalist for many years. Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes sense that you would be writing lyrics for. I don't know. It just seems like it would make sense that you're writing lyrics for a band and you're writing about the music scene. It seemed like you just had such a passion for it that it was just, like this is how it gets out of me.
I really did. Yeah. And I still do. I mean, I'm still playing in four bands right now. I'm still, recording and, songwriting and playing live and putting out releases. That has never really ended, and it's been that way since my high school years for, 30-ish years now. I've been doing that. At that point in time, yeah, it's a lot of the music industry, as far as my career is concerned, and also the music industry as far as what my maybe hobby was concerned. And it was nice to put those pieces together. And yeah, you're right. I was a writer, did a lot of writing, of course, for magazines and stayed very busy on that end. At the same time, also try to play out as much as I could and try to record as much as I could and, be somebody who really lived and breathed music as much as possible.
How many tours did you guys do between the first and the second? Well, technically, you have the full length, and then you guys do the split with Pollen in '99.
That's correct. Yeah, we never did a second full length. We only had one full length. We had the split with Pollen. We also had a 7-inch that we put out as well. So those are the real three releases that Coed ever had. We did one US tour in the summer of 1999. That was a full US tour all the way through the South, up the East Coast, across the Midwest, and back down through California. We did at least two, maybe three regional tours of going through Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and then circling back. Or we would go straight across through Nevada, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, come back, that type of thing too. So we did probably three regional tours, maybe four, because we also did one where we went up through California and up to Nevada, Northern California and Northern Nevada, and came back down. And then we did that one big US tour that we went. That was probably a good just under a month or so of, circling the entire US, which was a lot of fun.
Were you the one that was booking the shows?
No, I wasn't. Mac handled a lot of the booking, actually. I kind of left it to him because he had established a lot of contacts throughout the US at that point. We were working in that network of record labels, promoters, and other bands that were all just kind of getting together and helping each other out. I mean, there were a ton of small labels back then we were on a bunch of comps, like a lot of comps. And so that was very helpful too. And those labels that put us on those comps would then get us in touch with local promoters or local clubs or bands from that area. I mean, there are just these cool little labels, In It Records or Springman Records or Negative Progression or Red Leader or Rebound or again, Drive Through, Law of Inertia, all these great little labels that were all willing to help us out and try to get us to, get shows in their neighborhoods or wherever they were based in, or at least just send us contacts, phone numbers or email addresses, whatever it may be, to make things happen. So it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of mailing tapes out, a lot of sometimes even just sending postcards to bands. I remember we used to get postcards from the Alkaline Trio, would just correspond via postcards. So that was kind of neat. And they had just put out, I think, their first 7-inch, which was the Sundial 7-inch or something like that. And they hadn't even put out their first full length just yet. It was just really neat to correspond with them. And of course, we played a very early show with the Alkaline Trio. They finally made it to Southern California. We played on the bill. It was all Asian Man Records bands and then us actually on that bill. They were one of the openers, one of the small bands on the bill at the time. So pretty neat to have been there, see that band grow to what it has become since, of course.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. Was it Sundials or For Your Lungs Only? Do you remember?
It may have been. Yeah, great question. I don't know at that point in time. They had just signed an Asian Man, so it was before God Damn It came out.
I think For Your Lungs Only was before that.
Yeah, probably For Your Lungs Only at that point in time. But yeah, just kind of corresponding with all these bands across the country. Mac was really good about that. He was able to make a lot of connections that way. And we were able to, of course, book a tour. We had help from a booking agency here in California. I believe they're in San Diego, and they're helping us out a little bit, trying to find us shows and whatnot. But a lot of it we did on our own too, and some of it was, it got to the point where we would wake up that morning and get on a payphone and find the nearest 7-Eleven or whatever it was, get on a payphone and start calling around to figure out where are we playing that night. So sometimes that's how tight it became. We would figure it out and we'd get out there and make it happen.
And that's pretty brutal too, because if you're touring the West Coast, the drives are so much longer than they are on the East Coast. So that must have been a little stressful if you're like, okay, we have a 10-hour drive and you're calling and no one's picking up. You're like, okay, we're just gonna throw caution to the wind and go.
Yes, exactly. And so it was just kind of a unique experience for us to get out there and see what ends up happening. And we played a lot of very interesting shows that way too. Some of them we were placed on bills that we really shouldn't have been on that bill. Just a really bad match. It was like a bunch of speed metal bands and then us. Those types of shows that we got where we're like, yeah, we're definitely not really in the right crowd over here, but that's okay. We'll go and play anyways, and who knows, maybe we'll make a couple fans in the process. So we were kind of down for anything at that point, and it worked out pretty well.
I've told this story before, but we ended up playing a show on our first tour. No, it was our second tour in Maryland at some metal show where I mean it was like one band got up and they had lights behind them, all the lights are off and they're dressed in black, it like cloaked in black and singing, and it was super death metal. And we were like the second or third band, and we get up there and we're like playing this pop punk. And my buddy's in the crowd, and he tells us afterwards, he's like, these two girls are standing in front of you, and the one girl's, or it was like a guy and a girl or something, and someone goes, "What is this?" It's the person goes, "I don't know what this is."
Oh my goodness! Wow.
That's so funny. That was rare though. It was like that was definitely rare that we got on bill. I feel like more in the beginning is where that happens, and later on they start going, we know what sound, what we've heard of you, we know what it's going to make sense. Did you guys have like, I don't know, did you have a lot of good shows where it meshed and it did make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There were a lot of good shows actually, where it was just like, yeah, this is the right crowd, this is the right scene, these are the right bands that we're playing with. The audience is super appreciative. Yeah, we had a lot of those. So we were placed on some really, really well-fitting bills. I think we played a lot of great shows with, with our friends' bands, and again with bands that we had, just met that night. Next thing you know, we start corresponding with those bands, and when they came through California, we were able to set them up with shows too. So we were able to have some reciprocal relationships with these bands, which I think was really great, helping us out, and so we helped them out. Just the network that was going on back in the day was really cool, and people were just out there to help each other. And I was, again, just so appreciative of everybody who stepped up to make it happen. There was just so many people out there. I can remember all these just awesome instances. We were in El Paso, Texas, and there were some folks out there kind of helping us, trying to book shows and whatnot. And we're hanging out in this apartment, and the At the Drive-In guys are there. Oh, cool! So, hanging out with them, and so they jumped in our van and gave us a tour of El Paso, and just like hanging out in our van with the At the Drive-In guys. And I was pretty excited. They had just released, I think, In Casino Out at that point in time. It was just a really great phase, especially in that band's career as they're kind of building themselves up and whatnot and becoming a lot more popular. But we also played shows with, like, in Rapid City, South Dakota. We played a show with the Locust. That we were at like a 4-H club or one of those types of places. We played a show with the Locust in Rapid City, South Dakota, and we had heard about the Locust, of course, but we never heard their music until we went and saw them. We got to meet the Stereo for the first time on their 300 tour. So they had just released the 300 record, and we got to play several shows with them in the Midwest. We had just gotten their CD, so we were really pumped on all their songs. And yeah, I mean, just, again, either random bills or, really awesome bills. And it didn't matter to us. We were all about just going out there and playing. A show was a show, was a show to us. And if it was great, awesome. And if it wasn't great, at least we got to play a show.
What were you guys like live?
I think we were fun. We like to have fun up on stage, I mean, that's one way I would describe ourselves. We didn't take ourselves super seriously. We like to have a little fun and just kind of get up there. And we did strive to play a good show. I would say we were quite well rehearsed, well practiced. I think that, overall we came across as a band that was friendly, was fun, was accessible, like I said earlier. That was important as well. A band that hopefully, that would really cater to a large cross section of the audience. So if you were into something fast, we had that. If you were into something really melodic, we had that as well. If you were just a fan of female vocals, we had that too. I think that was another selling point for us, is that we did offer kind of a variety of things that we were doing that really helped to get us a wide fan base.
I'm like trying to find photos of you guys on Google, and there might be one. There's a guy with dreads. Was he in your band?
So that Mac had dreads at the
Okay.
time. He would later cut off his dreads, maybe about a year into the band or so.
Yeah, there's another one too where it says co-ed stream new single on punknews.org, and there's two guys and two girls, so that doesn't make any sense.
No, that's probably not us as co-ed. There may be, I think there have been at least a couple other co-ed bands out there. So you might be looking at one of the other co-ed bands out there.
Yeah, there's literally only one photo of you guys on Discogs. There's like a new band out, or a newer, I don't know how new they are, but it's like a big band called Coed, and they're actually on your Spotify page. So sometimes if a band has the same name or close, they'll mix them in the discography. So they're like, because I was looking, I was like, oh, you guys put a record out in 2020 called File Under Rain Clouds. I'm like, I
Oh
don't think
no,
that's right.
that's actually that is an odds and ends collection of
Oh,
stuff that was compiled a few years ago. Mac compiled all that stuff and then put it up there. That's actually kind of B-sides and odds and ends and stuff that was on comps or stuff that was just kind of laying around. And he put that together and put that up there on Spotify. That is not, that was never pressed to vinyl or CD or anything. It was just kind of well, there's a bunch of tracks laying around. He thought, well, he should just put these together and put them out there and, give people a chance to hear some more stuff that the band had done that was never pressed to CD or pressed to vinyl.
okay. What were you guys like as a band? Did you guys get along?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were pretty tight, I would say. We like to have fun together. We got along pretty well. In the van, we like to have a lot of fun with each other, just kind of messing around and playing jokes on each other and having a good time in the hotel rooms as well, too. I actually came across some photos and some video a few years ago of us, and I just thought, yeah, we're a fun group of folks to hang out with. Yeah, we did. We got along quite well in the band. We were just kind of all in it for the same reasons, which was for the love of the music and for getting out there, helping to, just kind of spread what we were doing as best as we could. I mean, to this day, I still talk to Mac regularly, and I'm still very much in touch with Jeff, our first bass player, quite regularly too. So, these are folks who have been in my life for, going on 30 years here. So it's, quite important to me. I still have that connection, at least with Mac and Jeff. So
What happened with Kathy?
Kathy had left the band. Well, the band kind of disassembled itself, I should say, probably in late 2000. And then we did decide to play a last show, January 2001. And we kind of all saw that, yeah, this is kind of the end of the band at that point. Kathy had left. We had actually, Mac and I and Sean were still talking, and we got an email that we received from Japan about a month after we broke up. So again, the band broke up. Our last show was January of 2001 at the Troubadour, and that was actually with Zach from Zoink's band, big in Japan at the time. About a month later, we get this email from Japan saying, "Hey, we would be interested in having you guys if you guys want to come and play over there." And we were like, "Oh, okay." We were kind of broken up at that point, but we didn't want to miss out on that opportunity. Mac had a friend who knew of a female singer and put them in touch, and her name was Katrina. He contacted Katrina, and Katrina seemed quite interested in singing with us. And so we rehearsed with Katrina. She did really well. She was already a kind of a pro in a sense here. She had already been performing with other types of groups. She really wasn't from the punk scene per se, but she got acclimated very quickly to it. We ended up going to Japan in May of 2001 with Katrina as our vocalist and did several shows there. And then after that, we had totally said, okay, that was it. The band, we're going to close up shop on co-ed. And interestingly enough, about 6 or 7 years later, maybe around 2008, 2009, Mac, Katrina, and I actually got together in a studio and put out a record called, the band was called Flight to Calico. And we put out a self-titled LP, actually CD. It was never pressed to vinyl. We just self-released it to CD and sold it on CD Baby or whatever it was. That was kind of, sort of, I guess, a little bit of a continuation of what we had done with Coed. It was quite different in the sense that, it was Mac, Katrina, and myself, and we never played a live show. So it was only a studio project, and that was it.
What happened? So what did Kathy? Why didn't she play the show with Japan? And how did she like? You kind of like you were starting to say it, but then you're like, we got Katrina. Did Kathy just say like, I just don't want to do this anymore?
I think Kathy, yeah, had just was not interested in doing the band. Part of that had been, the relationship that she had with Mac had broken up by that point in time. That also, I think, had played a factor in the band also disbanding. I could imagine, yeah, she was just, wanting to do something different and moving on. Did her years with the band and decided, yeah, she wanted to do perhaps something different at that point in time. I don't think she ever joined any other bands. I have not been in touch with her in over 20 years, so I really don't know what she had done post co-ed. She had sang on a couple projects while she was in co-ed. She had guest sang on one track from a band called Eveready, and Eveready were also on Cool Guy Records, and there was an album called Festivus for the Rest of Us, and she sang a track guest vocals on a song called Signals. That album, I think, came out, while we're still a band. And another band from Reno, Nevada called Crush Story. And she sang maybe two or three songs on one of their albums. I think the album that she sang on was called A Plus Electric, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what she's done since. Again, I haven't been in touch with her for a good 2 decades or so. But yeah, she decided to leave the band, and or the band just kind of disbanded altogether. When the email came in from Japan, we decided, well, then we'll go ahead and try to keep this going for Japan, and that's when Mac was able to get Katrina to come and sing for the Japanese tour.
So I talked to years ago when I first started this. I talked to Ryan from the band Discount. Doing
Yes,
them, and
yes.
I was asking him about like Allison, and she's the singer, and he's like, I was trying to get in touch with her too, and it was just like she just didn't. She's doing something new that she's been doing for a while. I think it's pretty popular, and she just like from what someone said, I don't know if it's true, but they were like just doesn't want to have any connection to Discount or something, doesn't want to talk about it or something like that. So I was always wondering, like, people, sometimes when they leave the band, they're like, oh yeah, they're just like, I just don't, I'm out. I don't need to go back and relive those days.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for some folks, yeah, that might be the case where, they leave the band and then they just want to move on and do other things. And, the band was a chapter in their lives, and now they have other chapters they want to move forward into. This is the first co-ed interview I've done in over 20 years, so it's kind of interesting talking about something that happened a quarter century ago. I had to kind of think about certain things and maybe get some notes together to kind of remember how things all went in that process. But yeah, the band kind of seemed to just, move on. We decided, yeah, January 2001, that would be our last show at the Troubadour, and we'll call it a day at that point. And so that's what we did until an email came in from Japan. So, but yeah, then after the Japanese tour, we had never had played as co-ed after that. So that pretty much closed that chapter. Mac and I still played music after that. We put out we actually, I take that back. We never released it, but we went into the studio and we recorded 5 songs with Bob Hogue and Kevin Scanlon at Flying Blanket Studios in Arizona. That was a band that we had created called the Big West. And the Big West was Mac on guitar and singing, myself on bass and singing, and then we got Parker Case on drums. And Parker is now, I believe, in Say Anything. He had gone on to do some other stuff later on too. We ended up playing live shows as a trio, the 3 of us, but we never released that recording, the Big West, until maybe a couple years ago. We ended up putting that up on Spotify. I don't think anyone knows about it because we really didn't tell anyone about it. We just played maybe a couple dozen shows, and then that kind of fizzled out as well.
Well, now they do.
Yeah, now they do. Exactly. If you want to hear the Big West, there you go on that end. And I sang I think, I don't know, 2 or 3 songs in that EP, and Max sang another 2 or 3. There's one that I think we trade off on. But yeah, I played bass live in that band, so it was a chance for me to try something different and get away from behind the kit and get to the front of the stage and actually sing my own songs for the very first time too. So that was kind of neat. We kept things going, Mac and I, musically. We still are doing things even to this day. Mac and I are involved in a little project that we're trying to get off the ground here called Pitch Invaders, which is actually a band all about soccer and punk rock. He's written a bunch of soccer themed songs because, like I said earlier, he was a soccer player at Cal Poly Pomona and was a kinesiology major. And he, went into teaching PE for a long time and coaching soccer and all that. He's very much involved in the soccer scene. So he's decided to put a band together, and I'm involved in that band. I don't know much about soccer at all other than what I played as a kid, but so it's kind of funny in the sense that I'm part of this whole soccer themed band, but I'm very much disconnected from all things soccer. We haven't played any shows or anything. We're just kind of putting some recordings together and getting it out there and seeing what will end up happening on that end. But it's kind of for fun, but also, hey, if things take off, right? We're still very much connected in the music scene, and I play in 3-4 bands pretty regularly right now. It's been great. It's been wonderful to continue on, and I've consistently been playing ever since co-ed all the way through. I pretty much have never stopped. Been on tours with other bands and gone out and played as much as I can.
I was going to ask you about this because on Discogs you have your own page. I don't know if you know about this. You're credited on some split with Jeff Ott and
Oh yeah,
Amanda or Epith
yeah, that
Epithel
was
Union.
the record label needed somebody to actually do the layout for the CD at the time, and I happened to have a Mac with Quark Express or whatever software I was using back in the time. So that I was just helping the record label getting some layouts together. That was really all I did with that. So, but we did end up co-ed did end up playing with 15 when 15 reunited. This would have been, I think, May of 1998, I believe it was. 15 reunited, and those were big shows. I mean, we played in Arizona, and several hundred people were in the audience. It was a good sized show. It was great because I was a 15 fan, so to see 15 get back together and then to find out that we could open up for them, on several shows was really a exciting experience for us.
Well, you guys were also on the same label as them, technically.
Yes, so Cool Guy Records did release, yeah,
Extra Medium Kickball All Star.
yeah. So Cool Guy Records re-released that record and also did that Jeff Ott solo record with Amanda. Yeah, we were kind of connected on that whole circle with the Cool Guy Records thing. Yeah, then we did that split with Pollen. The guys in Pollen were awesome, still are. I'm still in touch with those guys even to this day. They're still doing, great work. And of course, Pollen reunited last year, and Mac and I saw them play. They did a reunion tour, or not reunion tour, just one reunion show. They opened up for the Ataris.
I've been trying to get Dan on this thing for 3 years, and we just can't. Every time we've tried to, he owns some business that I don't know. I forget what he does, but he's like, it's like some. I think it's like marketing or something like that. He's like, shit, man, I can't do it. I'm slammed. I'm like, all right. So I just keep bothering him just to hit him up because we played a show with them we played 2 shows with them on our last tour out in Indiana and some other house show out there. What I'm remembering too is that I think they were touring with your split because I remember that artwork when I was looking up on Discogs where it's like, I think that's the too, like in the back of it, it has the male female symbol for any icon or whatever, and I think that's why like when you reached out I was like, yeah, like when I heard about co-ed I heard it was like 2 guys and 2 girls, and that was for some reason that was the not the rumor, but
Yeah, that artwork is actually courtesy of Jeff Caudle from Gameface. So Jeff Caudle from Gameface actually designed our split EP with Pollen, and also designed our album Sometimes Always Maybe Never. And in fact, Jeff Caudle from Gameface is designing a record that I'm going to be releasing in the next few months, and so he just finished the artwork this week on that. So I'm still in touch with Jeff. And in fact, I'll be playing a show in about 2 weeks with his new project that he's been working on called Low Coast. Putting those pieces together is still a part of that whole circle and a part of that scene 25 years later.
Yeah, actually, he was one of the first interviews I'd started doing outside of the Jersey scene. Like, a buddy of mine asked me if I wanted to interview. He's like, "Do you want to interview Jeff and do you want to interview Popeye from Far Side?" And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be good. I don't know how I'm gonna like interview these guys. That's like literally how it started. I remember going into those interviews, I was so nervous because I was just like, I don't know if I'm qualified to do this. then and then like 5 years later, still doing it. But yeah, he was super cool to talk to. I remember him saying he was into graphic design, but
Yeah, he's done a lot of album art for a lot of bands. He's been very popular as far as just doing great graphic design for records, and I think he very much loves doing that type of thing too. So, I mean, here to this day, 25 years later, I'm still asking Jeff if he can do artwork for my band's releases and whatnot. But getting back to the Pollen guys, yeah, you mentioned you've been trying to interview those guys. I know, yeah, Dan is busy. Dan, I think he runs a screen printing business as well. And so he's been pretty busy with that. We met the Pollen guys through, I used to write a lot of letters to bands. I was that kind of guy. If you had a P.O. box in your liner notes and I liked your record, you would get a letter from me. I wrote Bill Stevenson from All, and I said, Bill, I'm just a big fan of All and Descendants and all the stuff that you've done. I'm also a fan of the stuff that you've recorded, including, bands like Big Drill Car. He wrote me back and said, if you like Big Drill Car, there's a band I just recorded called Pollen, and you got to check them out. And so I was at the record store and in the CD bin. Sure enough, I found the Pollen CD. I put it on, and within the first 3 tracks, I was like, yes, this is 100% up my alley. And I got really excited. So I wrote a letter to the Pollen guys and said, I love your band. I'm in a band too. Here's a tape. Next thing you know, I'm connecting with those guys. And the first time I met the Pollen guys was actually, they were opening up for the Descendants when the Descendants reunited as part of their Everything Sucks tour. They had played, I think it was out in San Diego at Soma. And I got to see them and got to see Pollen, of course, open up for that tour. That was kind of our connection at that point. So, I have Bill Stevenson to thank for connecting me to the Pollen guys and making that all happen.
that's gotta be so cool for the Pollen guys to be like, yeah, we were recommended by Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So then that's when we met with them and started playing shows with them. And then we heard what Bob and Kevin were recording. They were just recording their own music, their demos and whatnot, but they sounded really good. And we thought, we should record with Bob and Kevin from Pollen. So we went out to their studio out in Phoenix. Actually, I think it was in Mesa or Tempe, somewhere in that area. And we recorded some tracks with them that ended up on that 7-inch that's called Soft Constant that we had released. We did some other tracks that ended up on the split. So they recorded themselves on the split, and they also recorded us for the split too. Again, all this stuff is still happening a good quarter century later.
I just want to dip in for a second before I start wrapping this up about your time at Alternative Press, just writing for them. You said it was like 7 years you wrote for them?
Yeah, I wrote for them for about 7 years, I think it was. Yeah.
What was the time period that was that between?
I would put it around 2001 to maybe 2007, 2008, somewhere in that range. Maybe a little earlier, but I would guesstimate somewhere in that range.
Were you, because I know you were like freelancing, right? You weren't like a
I
full-time
was a
employee?
freelancer, yeah. So I had never been to their offices. They were based out in Cleveland at the time. So I'd never been to their offices or anything of that nature. It was more of, me sending in my clips. And I happened to know someone who also was working there at the time. So that was kind of my connection over there. I enjoyed writing for Alternative Press and interviewing a lot of great bands, reviewing albums, just being a part of that circle, being able to have this cool freelance gig. I started writing for Alternative Press while I was the editor-in-chief of Main Street Magazine. So I had my full-time job, and then I was writing on the side a little bit too. I'd written for several other magazines too. There was a time where I could walk into any bookstore in America and go to the magazine section and see my byline in at least 2 or 3 magazines at any point in time. So it was great. It was a lot of fun doing that writing. I've interviewed several hundred bands in my career, everyone from big pop stars all the way down to totally obscure bands that maybe have sold 100 records at the most. So everyone and anything in between.
What was probably your biggest interview for All Press?
Good question. I wonder. I'm wondering if I did interview. I may have interviewed Dave Grohl for Alternative Press, but
Oh,
I may
wow.
have been Modern Drummer magazine. I can't remember if it was one or the other. I also wrote a lot for Modern Drummer magazine too. But yeah, I did a lot of big features like Newfound Glory and Less Than Jake. Those are some larger features. I think I did an early feature of Fallout Boy too. This would have been before they broke big. I may have done some early Paramore stuff, if I can remember. But yeah, I'd written quite a few things for Alt Press. They had a great crew over there. They really had their finger on the pulse of what was going on. They're really publishing a lot of the band stories that were already popular, and those that really you needed to know about too. They always did those issues of like 100 great bands that you need to know about, this or whatever it was. And so I always they would assign me, a handful of those bands to go and interview. And that was always a lot of fun, just talking to those bands and seeing what would end up happening with their careers too.
Yeah, I used to love that. I would go there. I mean, this was even in 2015. I was on the road and I was in Texas, and they were because I mean, I kind of fell out of the loop a little bit. I still feel like I got my finger on the pulse with some of the bands that are coming up, but I remember opening it up and each page I would look them up or I'd write their name down in a note in my phone and just reading their description and just try to find it. You ever hear this band Anakin?
Anakin, no, I don't. That doesn't ring a bell for me. No.
They're really good. They're kind of like a Weezer. They're kind of like Weezer-ish, like Blue Album Weezer-ish. They're really good. Yeah, good. But I know, just a super side random note, but that's how I get that. Yeah, I used to love All Press. I remember my little sister just reminded me the day, like I bought her like a year subscription when she was little, just so I was like, oh, you're gonna like these bands, and then she said how she found so many bands because of that magazine.
Yeah, that magazine was just packed with information, packed with interviews, packed with record reviews. I mean, those and some of those issues were really thick back then too. I mean, you would flip through over 100 pages of awesome stuff. They were just really great, and they had a really great timing with what they were doing back then.
Did you ever do any of the oral history ones that they did? They would do like old. This is how I learned about botch. This was years ago.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. I don't think I did. I did moderate a couple of things where like a member of a band would interview a member of another band that influenced them.
Yes, some of those.
And so I think I moderated an interview between, I believe it was one of the members of the Donnas who had interviewed one of the members of L7. We all met together, and I was just kind of there to make sure things went smoothly and all that. They had really good ideas. It wasn't just regular interviews and regular record reviews. They also had great ideas. They had like little kind of almost like scene reports that they would do about, I think it was called My Hometown or something, where a band would talk about what their whole locale was like the cool venues to go to, the good record stores to go to, some other cool shops, and kind of the cool bands of the area and whatnot. So they're very smart in how they put things together and very creative with their concepts.
Did you ever interview someone from there and just mention you were in co-ed or something like that, and they're like, "Oh shit, I remember that band."
You know, um, I usually try to keep those things separate. So I usually did not bring my band into a lot of the interviews that I did. Uh, just unless there was like a real connection where I was like, oh yeah, we totally kind of were on the same bill or something like that. Then maybe that may have came across every once in a while. But usually I try to keep my work somewhat separate from my band stuff. I was connected to a lot of record labels, a lot of publicists, a lot of managers and whatnot, but I really didn't try to use those connections to the advantage of my band.
Well,
And
no, not in that sense. More like when you guys were done and someone, if they're like, "Oh, did you ever play music?" You're like, "Yeah, I used to be in a band." They're like, "Oh, what band?" You're like, "Co-ed." They're like, "Oh shit, I remember that band."
yeah, that happened every once in a while, but probably once in a blue moon. Yeah. On rare occasions, we would make that kind of connection sometimes, when the interview was done. Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, cool, man. All right, so I'm gonna start wrapping this up. Before I ask the last two questions, is there a story you'd like to tell that you've never told before in an interview that you'd like to tell now?
Hmm. Let me think about this for a second. One of the cool things was we were a big fan of the band the Bullweevils. We got to stay with their drummer. His name was Brian, and we got to stay with him in Chicago when we were on tour. It was really great because the band had actually had either broken up or had gone on hiatus by that point in time. This would have been July of 1999. We had covered the Boll Weevil song "Happy" on our first album on our LP. Sometimes, always, maybe never. It was kind of a hidden track after the last song. It would be, you'd wait, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes, and then it would kick in. That was kind of a thing bands were doing back in the day, that hidden song on the CD, 6 minutes after the last song ended. We had covered as an acoustic song too, which was quite unusual. So we took this very upbeat song, very powerful song called Happy, that the Boll Weevils had recorded, and we did it our own way in a very kind of soft and very kind of sparse acoustic way. And it was really, I mean, I think it came out really cool. And so we were big fans of the Boll Weevils, and of course, you can even listen to that first album. You'll hear the Boll Weevils' influence on some of those songs too. And so, anyways, we were on tour. We were with Brian, who was I think he was the first drummer because I think they had a second drummer named Brett. We were playing the Fireside Bowl in Chicago, and I think somehow we had reached out to Daryl from the Boll Weevils as well, and he found out that we were going to be playing there. We get there, and Daryl's there, and of course Brian, who we were staying with us, he came with us, or maybe he showed up later on, but he was at the show too. We got this idea of, you know what, let's reunite the Boll Weevils for a song up here. Even though the band was not active, we decided to call Brian and Daryl up to the stage. I got off my drums, and Brian took my drumsticks and got behind the kit. I went to bass, I think. Mac was on guitar, and then Daryl picked up the microphone, and we sang "Happy" from the Boll Weevils, and we did it all the regular Boll Weevils way. So it was kind of cool to reunite the Boll Weevils just for one song, just that one instance right there. So for those who know the complete history of the Boll Weevils, I just want to make sure we can add that little footnote that yes, two members of the Boll Weevils had played one Boll Weevil song for that one show in July of 1999 out at the Fireside Bowl. And that was really kind of cool to, again, get a chance to not just play a show with our heroes, but literally play alongside on stage with our one of our favorite bands at the time. So that was really neat. It's neat when, one of your favorite bands wants to join you on stage.
That's a really cool story. That I love that. It's so simple, but it's so awesome. Holy shit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it's just something that I listened to those Boll Weevils records nonstop when I was in college, and it influenced me in so many different ways when it came to songwriting. Like I said, there are songs on Sometimes Always that are very Boll Weevils influence, as there are other bands of that era too. So you listen to that record, you'll hear stuff that sounds maybe a little bit like Lagwagon or Game Face or All. I mean, it just all kind of comes together, and it was just really a really great opportunity to put that band up on stage with us and do a little number.
All right, man. Last two questions before I ask the last one. Is there anything you'd like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend or a cause, it could be about both.
Sure. I guess I'll plug the stuff that I've been active on recently. Like I said, Mac and I are currently working on this soccer punk project called Pitch Invaders. I'm also actively playing in a few bands. I've been playing with a band called Junior Juggernaut for the last 19 years, and we are going to be releasing our fourth full-length LP this summer, and that's pretty exciting for us. Again, Jeff Caudill from Gameface did the cover art there. Kevin Scanlon from Pollen did our photography. So putting all those kind of back together here. I am playing with members of Gameface and another band called Sleep Pod 2. We don't have any releases out just yet, but we have played some shows together, and that's been really great. So it's Guy and Todd from Gameface, plus myself and my friend Chris singing. So that's neat that I actually get to be in a band with members of Gameface. Again, a band that I grew up listening to nonstop. I've been in a band called Turning Violet for the last 6, 7, maybe 8 years now, something like that, which is a great band. Also, female fronted band too. Actually, we have 2 girls and 2 guys in that band. And then I'm also in a band called Foreclosure, which has a lot of pop punk veterans from the last 30 years. One of the guys in the band was in a band called Buford, which was a really great band from the 90s. And of course, there was some other guys from bands called Dead Lazarus Place and, so on and so forth. So that's kind of a culmination of a bunch of scene veterans all getting together to put out a record. We have a record that will be coming out probably in the next, maybe at the end of the summer or early fall. Again, that band's called Foreclosure. It's FOR and then closure. There's no E in the middle there. So I've been staying very active as much as I can and just playing out as much as I can. I have over a dozen gigs booked for this summer so far, and recording and songwriting and just trying to maintain at least a foot in the door. If anything, I go to a lot of shows too. So I never left. My whole thing is I've always been a part of it in some way, shape, or form with all the bands I've been doing over the years.
I love it. That's so cool, man. Last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
I think the word that probably has come up most often in this interview has been accessibility. And I think that's important. I want to be accessible in the sense of if bands, need shows or coming through town or whatever, I have, tried to help them out and vice versa. The fact that bands help each other out. There's always this access that I think the scene has given us to each other that I think is really critical. If you want to be part of the scene, it's very open and easy to be a part of the scene. You can meet the bands. There's no real barrier between you and the bands per se. You can go say hi to them at the merch booth after the show, or you can go meet them at their van while they're loading in or loading up. There's that kind of access that I think is so important, and that's really what has helped Coed and all the other bands I've been in since is making these types of connections. And just, this ability to be involved and, even if you're not a musician, well, maybe you can help out in other ways, help the band sell the merch or help the band load in or, work the lights or whatever it might be, So there are those opportunities for the kind of DIY scene to continue to flourish. And I think that's important. And another thing maybe is this idea that we're all equals too, bands are just there to help out other bands. It's not like, well, one band is, more important than the other. And I think the scene has really kept this kind of egalitarian attitude across the board where, everyone's just trying to help each other out, give each other a place to stay if you come through town. When you're on the road, help them out as much as you can, or, the drummer needs to borrow your drum set that night. Okay, fine. Yeah, you can borrow my kit. No problem. That type of stuff I think has been very important for the scene to continue to thrive and flourish and remain relevant and remain active.